April 1865 was a major turning point in American history. After Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865. The Reconstruction era started soon after. Not even a week later, President Lincoln and his wife, along with Henry Rathbone and his fiancée Clara Harris, went out to Ford's Theater to see the play, Our American Cousin. John Wilkes Booth, equipped with a gun and a knife, shot Lincoln in the head and stabbed Henry Rathbone in the arm. Lincoln was rushed to a nearby hospital, but unfortunately died the next morning. John jumped off the balcony that the Lincolns were watching the play on. He broke his leg and ran up on the stage. He screamed, "Sic semper tyrannis," which is Latin for, "Thus always to tyrants." 11 days later, pursuers found Booth in Garrett's barn. After refusing to turn himself in, he was shot. Although a pursuer claims to have shot Booth, it is unclear whether he was shot or he committed suicide. The barn was then set on fire. And here's a reenactment of President Abraham Lincoln's assassination.
It's the evening of April 14th, 1865. President Abraham Lincoln and his wife are at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. The play is a comedy, which Lincoln prefers, called Our American Cousin.
That will do for the present.
Just a week before, Confederate General Robert E. Lee had surrendered at Appomattox, virtually ending the Civil War. Mary Todd Lincoln will later recall that on that night, her husband seemed truly happy. The first time she had seen him so content in a long time. Audience members immediately identified Lincoln's assassin as 26-year-old actor John Wilkes Booth.
Fun fact: when Abraham Lincoln was shot on April 9, 1865, he was carrying 2 pairs of glasses, lens polisher, a pocket knife, a watch fob, a linen handkerchief, and a brown leather wallet with a Confederate $5 bill and 9 newspaper clippings.
April 1865 affected America then and now in many different ways. The most direct effect of the Civil War ending is the Reconstruction era starting. Before his assassination, Lincoln tried to make sure that the North and South reestablished their bonds. But after Lincoln's assassination, his vice president, Andrew Johnson, succeeded him. Johnson was a man of the South, so he made decisions that were biased towards the South, like removing some of the things that Lincoln did before his assassination. Ultimately, the era of trying to rebuild the bonds between the northern part of the country and the southern part of the country was harder and slower for everyone. Every effect of this month was not negative, as you may think. Overall, our national security has increased. A little down the road, the United States Secret Service was introduced to better protect our president. The Secret Service has been in effect since then. Before any successful assassination, people slept in the halls of the White House to try to get in a word with the president. The government realized how dangerous this could be if one of the people were armed and tried to kill the president. They immediately kicked everyone out and made the White House secure, with no one living there besides the first family.
April 11th, 1865. 2 days after the end of the Civil War. In the White House, President Abraham Lincoln agonized over his first speech since the defeat of the South. The jubilant crowd outside expected a celebration of the Union victory. Instead, the president warned that Reconstruction, as he called it, would be fraught with great difficulty.
The war has spiraled far beyond the worst imaginings of anyone. Over 600,000 people have died in the last 4 years. The largest slave system of the modern world is in shambles, and no one knows what's going to replace it. People just cannot imagine how they're going to put the country back together again.
Lincoln conspirators were called over the couple of days after the assassination. They were given different sentences depending on how much they were involved. Lewis Powell, David Harold, George Astaroth, and Mary Surratt, yes, there was one, were charged with being associated with Booth on June 30th, 2 months and 15 days after the assassination, and hung on July 7th. Samuel Mudd was charged with conspiring with Booth and sentenced to life in prison, but pardoned by Johnson in 1869. Edmund Spangler was charged with helping Booth get out of Ford's Theater and was sentenced to life as well, but again, he was pardoned by Johnson in 1869.
April 1865 is a turning point because it is when the General of the Confederacy, Robert E. Lee, surrendered to the Union Army, led by General Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse. If the Union Army didn't win the war, then life in America would have been very different. For example, we might have slavery today and might not be as advanced as we are today. The reason why we might not be as advanced is because the North was more industrialized and had more factories, while on the other hand, the South was more agricultural and had more plantations. Not only that, but in April 1865, America's first assassination took place. President Abraham Lincoln was shot and killed by John Wilkes Booth in Ford's Theater. If Abraham Lincoln's assassination didn't happen, then we wouldn't have the securities we have now in order to protect the president. For example, we wouldn't have the Secret Service that was made in reaction to Lincoln's assassination, but the Secret Service didn't start to protect the president until the assassination of James A. Garfield. If the events that had taken place in April 1865 didn't happen, then America today would have been very different. Any major wars like World War I or World War II or any other historical events that had happened after the Civil War may have not have happened if the South, aka the Confederacy, won the war. It is because of the events that have happened in April 1865 that helped shape America into the place we know today. The place where freedom and equality is for all. Just think, where would you be if April 1865 didn't happen? Fun fact, there was a guard assigned to Lincoln the night of his assassination. His name was John Frederick Parker. He was not at his post when Booth assassinated Lincoln, and he was probably at the nearby bar. Another story worth drinking, George Astaroth was supposed to kill the vice president, but he chickened out and got drunk instead. All in all, April 1865 was a major turning point in American history. The Civil War ended at the Appomattox Courthouse. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated just 5 days after the end of the Civil War at Ford's Theater on April 14, 1865. If the events that took place in 1865 didn't happen, then American history would be very different. America's security greatly increased. If these events didn't take place, we might not have as good security like we do today. The Secret Service might have been established later, if at all, if Abraham Lincoln was